Family. Ooh, excuse me. Make sure the mic working. Hold on. Yeah, that was rude of me. But glad to be back with you for another episode of Swami Live. I look a little dark. It looks a little dark. Let's see. That's too much. Forgive me. We're gonna get this party started anyway. Family, glad to be back with you for another episode of Soul Swami Live. If you are new here, this is Soul Swami Live, where we discuss all things healing in various forms, whether it be homework, whether it be live energy readings. We do videos, conversations, and discussions, prompt questions, all types of things that we do to try to make sure we create a space for healing for all of us. Uh, Excuse me. You can catch us on. I thought about doing Instagram again today, but I didn't. We are always on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. You can always catch us there on at 7 o'clock Eastern Time. Thursdays we have a spinoff show, which is about it's our book club. So that was a spinoff to allow us to create a space where we feel comfortable reconnecting with that childlike energy. And most children like being read to, so that was where book club came from. And this week we generally start off every show with energy spot, energy cleansing, or we work on some chakra, or however you like to word it in your own language, makes you feel comfortable and authentic to you. So this week we are on the throat. And the throat is good for your authenticity. Are you living, thinking, and behaving in ways that are authentic to you? It is your communication. It is how you express yourself, and your throat is good for the truth. Revealing the truth, speaking the truth, receiving the truth, all types of things. If you are into color therapy, the color for your throat is blue. It says light blue, but we do variations of blue. This is my blue bowl, but for your throat, the color is blue. If you are into stones, you want to think turquoise. It's funny, I cannot find my turquoise ring that I normally have on, but I don't have it today. You want to think turquoise, aquamarine, lapis lazuli, and blue lace agate is pretty good for that. If you are into essential oils, you want to think things like chamomile, peppermint, cypress, and bergamot. So to start our energy cleansing, we generally do some sound bowl. So we do a little sound therapy. And I have my small bowl. And then we shift into some breathing exercises. I think we're going to do 4-7-8. I think we'll do 4-7-8 3 times, and then we'll do some visualization. Simple visualization. As a matter of fact, we will probably combine the visualization with the affirmations. We've been doing a lot of that lately. I kind of like that a little bit more. So, but for now, hopefully you're in a comfortable space. Are you getting there and you can just relax and listen to the small sound bowl. If you're new here or you old here, don't be afraid to put comments in the chat. This is an open forum. We generally like discussion, and if you would like to join the show for an energy reading, all you gotta do is hit the link that's in the description. breathing exercise we're going to do for 7, 8. And all you have to do is just focus on your breathing, and I will keep track for you. And, on the count of 3, family, we'll start. 1, 2, 3. Breathe in 4, 2, 3, 4. Hold 7, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Release 8, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Again, breathe in 4, 2, 3, 4. Hold 7, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Release 8, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Last time, family. Breathe in 4, 2, 3, 4. Hold 7, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Release 8, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And for visualization, I just kind of want you to close your eyes and envision that you can see the energy around you. The element for your throat is the ether. So as we say these affirmations, I want you to take your hands and push the energy away that you don't need. Slide in the energy that you do need. Visualize yourself controlling the energy, moving away things you don't need, and bringing things to you that you do need. And while we are saying these, make sure you focused on your breathing. So push energy and breathe in. I speak and hear truth. Push energy and breathe in. I communicate honestly. Push energy and breathe in. I live an authentic life. Push energy and breathe in. I'm fearless and free. Push energy and breathe in. I trust what I have to say. I speak and hear truth. I communicate honestly. I live an authentic life. I am fearless and free, and I trust what I have to say. Alright, family, we'll try to get this party started. Okay. We try to get this party started. I'm doing the most. I ain't even gonna tell you what I was laughing at. While I was checking YouTube. What am I trying to do? Okay. Distracted. Just stop that music playing in the background. And we can keep our party going. I really hope everybody's been having a fantastic week. It's been an interesting one for me. Work has been somewhat of a roller coaster. We had good news and then bad news and questionable news, so who knows what's next, but I understand That's life. And we've been working on our healing, so we're in a space where we understand a little bit and we can go with the flow a little bit better. If you are unfamiliar with what we've been talking about, we're going to continue our discussion on generational curses. But something I want to talk about a little bit before that is a new word. And I'm surprised that as the family together, as a soul family, we haven't even thought of this word. But remember Monday nights I had men's group, and we had men's group this Monday. And this week we did something a little different, but still in line with what we do. And we were talking about things that we wanted to let go. And then we had to think of a word, an emotion, a one word emotion that describes whatever we were explaining that we want to let go. Because, of course, we giving these long stories about what we want to let go and all these things because we really thought about it. We manifested. I mean, we thought about it. We shared with other people. We've got other opinions, but we really thought about it for our own lives. So it was easy for us to be able to explain what is something we want to let go, trying to take advantage of the energy now with the blood moon and the lunar eclipse and all this other stuff, right? So it got difficult when we had to think of one word to describe that, but that's good because we start connecting emotions, these stories, these feelings to the correct emotion. The feelings are the stories we tell ourselves, and the emotions are natural things. It's a part of survival, right? So yesterday we had a fairly new brother in there, and then we had a new brother that was in there, and it was his first time. And so he comes, it's his turn, and he explains his piece, and he goes in to his story or whatever. But his word that he said wound up being a very interesting word. And I'm surprised it's one that we haven't necessarily thought of, but I know it's one that as a collective we deal with. And the word that he said was discontent. And that discontent kind of, for me, it was like that DJ Clue bomb, Illuminati. It just kind of blew up my mind. And it really ties into the happiness paradox, right? So if you don't remember, the happiness paradox is that idea of those who chase happiness don't get it. The more you chase happiness, the more it decreases your chance of actually getting happiness because essentially you're projecting to the universe that you don't have happiness. You're projecting lack, right? So what it made me really think about is how in the sense that we're chasing happiness, or we want this sense of idea of happiness in our life, for a lot of us, happiness isn't quite the thing that we're trying to chase. They're trying to grasp. For a lot of us, we want less discontent in our lives. And it's just natural for us to assume the opposite of discontent is happiness. And I said that because I think that's a great word for us. I think it's a good word that we can do some discussing on at some point. What kind of things are you discontent about, right? So we have to do some work. I think we might do some work with discontent when we get to enmeshment. Enmeshment was a wild word for us. Anyway, make sure I'm getting it right. So far with our generational curses, we've been able to identify. I'm doing a lot of talking, so we haven't identified that many actually, outside of the one last that I identified for my family, which was guilt. That and envy was attached to that guilt. But so far, we have discussed abuse and trauma. And when we think about abuse and trauma, we put it in the context of physical abuse, emotional abuse, and then some of the trauma is specifically neglect and abandonment. We talked about how those thoughts and ideas, oh God, I hope I ain't messing nothing up. Those thoughts and ideas are passed down to us. Um, we've talked about, what was the word? As a matter of fact, I want to make sure I say the context correctly. All right. We looked at it in the context of what belief systems have, what some of these beliefs have caused harm. What do we want to do differently? And then we talked about a little bit of what are the resources that we need to be able to do this thing differently. So we've talked about addictions in the context of substance abuse and people, our addictions to people and codependencies. Ironically, we kind of talked a little bit about addiction to pain and how addiction will manifest a little bit more ways than just substance abuse, right? So we generally talk about substance abuse, but we did, and we included food as a substance. But then sometimes some of us are addicted to pain in the sense that we repeat patterns and behaviors and thought processes that I already know will create some sort of pain for us. And that's kind of tied to our worthiness. So we discussed that. We talked a little bit about poverty and financial instability in the context of generational debt, in the context of financial literacy. How does your family discuss finances? What are their thoughts? Are they like some of my people who still hide money in the mattress because they're so distrustful of the system? And investing sounds like a big risk of losing everything that you have, especially with the up and down in the market. We also talked about relationship dysfunction, specifically in the context of divorce. How does your family view marriages? How have they talked about marriages? How have they told you to navigate marriages? Is divorce an option for your family? Is never being a divorce the only option? Do your family, are a lot of marriages in your family? And then poor communication, when it talks about what type of things that we learn from our family on how we communicate in relationships now that may or may not be normal to the masses. What type of communication interactions with relationships have you had where people just quite didn't understand why you were saying things that way, how you were talking, or even how quickly you were able to move on, or how long you stay stuck in the moment because of that poor communication. All right, that's where we were at. Good, Andy. So now we're gonna move on to we did talk about mental health because I did the last one we did talk about was mental health in the context of disorders and stigmas, and I got into this long story about my family and the disagreement we had around this mental health idea. But what does your family think about mental health? Have the adults, and when we're thinking about context of family, we didn't make it, you don't have to have a long knowledge, the huge knowledge of your family's history. We just talking about our parents, our grandparents, and if you have that luxury to be able to think about your grandparents, and talking about our cousins. So those generations, not our great great greats, not your 1872 cousins. So we're keeping it in a small context. One of the I'm trying to sit here and think, do I want to talk about educational barriers or limiting beliefs and cultural norms? We'll try to keep it in alignment. So we'll talk about educational barriers. Again, in the context, what type of thoughts or ideas have your family given you as it relates to education, right? Um, We want to think about negative attitudes towards schools or low educational attainment, right? So, do you have a lot of college graduates in your families? Now, that doesn't necessarily, if you don't, that doesn't necessarily mean that your family isn't educated. They just may not have the degrees to certify that they have the education to match the degree, right? So, how does your family think about school? I know for my family, I can think about we were taught school was the way that we were going to find this success, right? And I'll never forget one time, a college friend of mine, we were having this discussion, and I swear to God, I still love her to death. It was the person I told y'all about. I used to call her every day and leave a message on her answering machine because that dates me. Singing the Ghetto Boys. My mind's playing tricks on me because it was her daddy's favorite song. So I just harassed her every day. Every day. But one day we were having this conversation and we were talking about college graduates, right? And she says to me, my daddy said college make you soft, right? And coming from a person who was homeless when he graduated from college, that idea seemed absurd to me. It was a ridiculous idea that college made you soft. I thought it was in line with those people that think that college is for people who have money, right? So I was like, no, college is just for people who willing to make the sacrifices, right? And then when I think about college makes you soft, I'm like, all these sacrifices I had to make, college don't make me soft, it make me stronger, right? So then I get out into the world with this college degree because my family had passed down all you need is a college degree. And the only counter I really hear to that is college make you soft. Because everybody else either says nothing or you got to get a degree, right? So I graduate from college and I try to get these jobs. No, I got this first job, no lie. And I worked it for a couple of months. And because now I had this college degree, I was like, the job I had, I was just testing plastic. And I really thought that I ain't have to go to college to get a job to test plastic. So I quit that job. And for the next year and a half, I couldn't find another stable job. So I was out just doing odd jobs, just trying to get scratching and surviving. And during that year and a half, one voice that kept coming up was, college makes you soft. College makes you soft. I kept hearing that college makes you soft. And I thought about it. And now, because I was living what he meant, I understood what he meant. So college is, it sounded like a negative attitude towards college, right? So that's why I brushed it off. But there was this idea that graduating from college gives you this sense of entitlement, right? So because of all my life, they told me once you graduate college, all you needed was a college degree. I had that sense of entitlement. I felt like once I get this college degree, then I'm going to get this amazing job and then I'm going to move on with life, right? But that's not how it works. The only thing that college really wound up doing was giving me the opportunity, opening more doors for me, being able to be in places that I may not be able to get into without it. But in those places, I still had to do what everybody else does, sell their skill set, sell themselves. So are there negatives? So as she was telling me this, what's on the surface seemed like a negative attitude towards college, it actually was something that allowed us to think about. So what type of ideas have your family thought about college, right? Most of my family didn't go to college. I probably, shit. Excuse my language because I was getting ready to say I was the only male college graduate. But I'm not the only because my brother has a degree. But I say I was the first male to get a college degree. Most of my family, they still making it, you know what I mean? were hustlers. I came from a family of hustlers. So good, bad, and indifferent, they hustled to make things happen. At least on my mother's side. My father's side was a little different. They were hustlers too, but less into the street life. They were more about hustling for your family, right? And then my mama's side of the family, they were hustling for their family too, but it was more of a sense to hustle to provide for your family. My father's side of the family, they still wanted to be there, so provisions looked a little different or could be. Is that something that you are hard on yourself about? Is that one of your goals that you are trying to attain? Are you trying to change your family's ideas around educational attainment? Right. The next one is limiting beliefs. Oh, I think I'm kicking the camera. Limiting beliefs and cultural norms. And I just have one line up under there to make me to refresh my memory on what I want to discuss. And it's that idea of we don't do that. Right. Limiting beliefs can be around education. There are families who think that education, all that learning is for other cultures. But the we don't do that. I can think about how many times have I heard this statement to describe my family or the culture that I'm a part of. We hear that all the time. As a matter of fact, I just seen a video today where a Caucasian woman was talking to other Caucasian people, telling them to stop telling people that they don't take showers every day. Stop saying that. Say, speak for yourself. And it's funny because when this idea of shower or washing your legs came out, the culture that I'm a part of was quick to say, we don't do that. Right? And it's funny to say that because when we start saying that, a piece of us, whether it's our culture or our family or whoever we are, we don't do that. What we wind up doing is devaluing the experience of those around us. Because even if we're having this discussion, we do that. When it comes to crime, I can think about the amount of times where based on the crime, we'll start judging the race of the person. For example, right now, there's this idea that school shootings are performed by one race of people. These limiting beliefs, these cultural norms that make you actually put you in this box of thinking that happens to only by one culture of people. But if you travel around a lot and you go to some of these schools in some of these major cities, they have metal detectors at the door. And one of the reasons they have metal detectors at the door is because of school shootings. All cultures experience violence, right? So when we don't think that certain parts of violence are a part of our culture, then we don't prepare ourselves for what we may embrace. How harmful of this idea of we don't do that has that been for you? Have your family said that towards things like exercise or diet? I remember when I first stopped eating pork. My family looked at me and said, "What are you, Muslim now? We don't do that. We eat pork." No, you don't do that. I can do something different, right? So what type of harmful ideas did we get from our limiting cultural beliefs and this idea of we don't do that? What do we want to do differently? One thing we should want to do differently, and I talk about it a lot when it comes to children, is exposure. Exposure, right? So, as a matter of fact, there's a lot of disconnects around food, right? And who seasons, who doesn't season, who does this, who does that. And what I recognize is every culture can cook. but they just may be have specialties in certain things, right? And exposure will allow you to see that, right? So I remember one, I'm not even gonna lie, I say this anytime. There's one culture that is unbeatable in one pot dishes and casseroles. They got casseroles you never even heard of in your life, right? And I grew up in a household where we really ain't do that. We ain't make casseroles. We ain't have a lot of one pot dishes. So as I grew, I love casseroles and one pot dishes, so I make that for myself. But before to that, it was a limiting belief for my family because we thought that we didn't do that. That is for those other people. And as long as we keep saying we didn't do that, that is for those other people, we are missing our opportunity to enjoy the beauty of life. Because the beauty of life resides in our interactions with each other. It resides in the stories we tell, the food we eat. That's why in a lot of religion, breaking bread and sharing meals has such huge significance. Because it's such a humbling experience, it allows us to pray together. And not that formalized prayer that a lot of people think of, but pray in a way that we are sharing and caring and living and interconnected with the people and things around us, right? Another huge one that I think is kind of affecting a lot of society right now, or one that literally pushed me into this idea of me doing Reiki, or even us building this Soul Family channel where we're trying to do healing. So, and it is emotional suppression, right? One way is discussing, when we think about this, is in the context of how in our families did we go about discussing our emotional needs and what type of ideas about masculinity and femininity that may have discouraged vulnerability, right? So I can think about, did you grow up in a household, like what type of harmful things that may have been passed down to you when it comes to expressing your emotions, right? I've been doing Reiki frequently lately, right? And one of the things that keep coming up with a lot of them is this idea of I'm too sensitive, too sensitive, too sensitive, too sensitive, too sensitive. A lot of people, I see this burden that a lot of people carry. They act as though being an empath is a curse, right? And the thing about that, what I find, oh, I'm sorry, you doing, oh shit, Sherry. I'm sorry, forget my cursing. Blame it on my mind and not my heart. I knew I was supposed to do something this weekend, but listen, I did you like that, and listen, I did one of my old coworkers even worse. I texted him and say, I'm gonna call you in 4 minutes. I ain't called them till Monday. And they was like, man, it was the longest 4 minutes I ever had. But Sherry, I appreciate you as always for stopping by. Emotional suppression is the one we're talking about now. So think about it. Think about it yourself. How was emotional needs discussed in your family? And what were the ideas around masculinity and femininity? And did those ideas allow for space for vulnerability, right? So when I keep hearing this idea of sensitivity, or people talking about how someone might take advantage of them because they're kind or nice or any of those things, all I think about is their foundation was built on this idea of emotional suppression, right? So that generally means that wherever you were, You did a lot of your upbringing, the environments that you were a part of in your foundational years didn't create a space for you to be able to discuss your emotions, right? So if you were one of those kids that cried a lot, they probably called you a crybaby. So as you grew older, you inherently thought that crying was a bad thing. You forgot that by your own tears would you be healed and cleansed of your own sins and bad behaviors. Because somewhere along the line, someone else's trauma was passed down and given to us because they didn't come to terms with their sensitivity. And they created, manifested from their own words and lives, from their own experience. They manifested a life in which no one valued their sensitivity. So now they're telling you to protect you for the world. They're telling you your sensitivity is a bad thing. In my family, I can really think about it, and it's funny now because now I'm giving myself permission to feel. We're giving ourselves permission to feel. But I can think about in my own family, it was kind of a box of emotions that we were allowed to experience, right? Anger was the emotion that we were definitely allowed to experience all the time. We can show anger, right? If you cry, it had to only be for pain, physical pain, like you getting a whooping, not you getting jabbed in the eye. You ain't supposed to cry for that. But if you get a spanking, you're supposed to cry for that, right? So anger was okay. And sadness was okay if somebody passed, right? So that really only gives you 3 emotions. So you don't know how to navigate confusion. We don't know how to navigate frustration. We don't know how to navigate contentment. We actually get in a space of contentment and think that's a sign that we haven't done enough. We need to do more, right? So how were you able to discuss your emotional needs within your family? How did you see everybody else responding to emotional need? How was your parents dating? How did your aunt and uncle navigate others' emotions? I see a lot of times, a lot of our families, we learn when things get emotional, we shut down. So now we don't know which emotions require us to move forward, which emotions require us to stand still, and which emotions require us to step back and reassess the whole situation, right? Then when it comes around ideas of masculinity and femininity, that can be very limiting. For a lot of times for boys, we teach them that they should not cry. Now that's the huge one. But I can think of some of the sayings we used to say as children. I think about, what is that? Girls are made of sugar and spice and everything nice. And boys are made of frogs and snails and puppet dog tails. I swear, we used to say that all the time. But what ideas are these messages sending to our children around masculinity and femininity? The amount of times that we have told young boys that don't cry, dust it off. We don't even tell them the correct spaces where crying is okay. We don't even tell them the healing properties of our own tears. We just tell them don't cry. And the wild thing about it is we allow girls to cry a little more unless they cry too much. Then if they cry too much, then we'll be hard on them, just like we are about boys. What if these ideas go against the vulnerability that we are trying to create in our lives? I remember one of the things when I was coming up in this transition of trying to figure out what manhood meant to me, I had this idea that a man works. That's just what you do. You don't work, you don't eat, right? And then I get out here as a man and I begin to work and I'm working hard. But then I wound up working in the field of education. And it kind of throws everything that I was taught on its head, right? Most of my family didn't understand why I'd get an education. They could not see that a man works. Because for them, education was something different. That ain't quite manly work. I remember all the times that I would meet new people and shake their hands and look them in the eyes and say something like, I'm a center director. And they'll look at me like, a man is in charge of a daycare? And it wasn't until I got into this environment of children that I understood that in masculinity, in manhood, there is a role for us to nurture. Our nurture comes through structure, discipline, routine. And then as I learned that the masculinity has a role within nurturing, I also had to learn that nurturing also includes hugs, words of affirmation, all of those things. And none of those things were a part of the idea of masculinity while growing up. What harmful ideas have taught you about femininity? I can tell you, as I have had the pleasure of interacting with a ton more families than I can count, leading women more than I can count, there's an idea of, because so many few marriages in our community, that we don't always get to see healthy marriages. And by that, we don't always get to see the role of healthy masculine in that. And we become so familiar to the way that our mothers reach us, how our mothers nurture us, that when masculine nurturing comes along, it seems like control. When you start to get out, as a matter of fact, I seen this whole conversation on TikTok the other day, and it was crazy because this guy was responding to a video that he saw, and a woman was saying the man that cares about you most will have the most advice for you. And he was talking about how true that was. And I was thinking to myself on how true that is. Because if I'm giving you advice, I want to see the best of you, the best version of you. If you're behaving in a way that's not alignment with the best version of you, I'm going to say that. But because we're so used to feminine nurturing, we take masculine nurturing as control. Right? So how have you been taught to view a woman's role? How have you been taught to see a man's role? And do these ideas really allow space for the vulnerability for us to be able to have the successful relationships that we will need to ensure that our children will have the best outcomes that they can have? Do these ideas around masculinity and femininity discourage vulnerability? I remember And it's funny because we talk about it now. I ran into a friend that when I ain't have any job or anything, right? I was telling them, I ain't have any of that. And they said to me, well, it didn't seem like it. And I recognized the reason why it didn't seem like that is because these ideas of masculinity that may not have been that word, they discourage vulnerability. So as a man, especially college educated and all this, I have to present myself or my life in a certain way. So in my idea of manhood and masculinity, that even when I needed help, I couldn't let people know that. And I understand that this idea of masculinity and femininity is not just for men, but there are women who the idea of having it together is not letting anybody know when they need help. That is a gender neutral thing that we've been taught that actively discourages vulnerability. The next one we want to discuss is listen, man. I'm laughing because listen, I got about 25 of these things, right? And 25 generational curses. And I swear we be struggling to get through 2 to 3 of them a night. So, we're going to have to maybe do some skipping so we can try to get to the ones that I think are ones that affect our family, our soul family. So the next one we want to talk about is fear-based decision making. And when we think about fear-based decision making, we want to put this in the context of avoiding risk and challenges, um, how has your family thought about the idea of taking risks? What kind of responses did you get when you said you want to move to a new city? I remember when I got ready to move to Wisconsin, and I was telling my family and friends that I was going to Milwaukee, and with the best intentions, everybody gave me so much fear. It started with, do black people even live there? You really moving to Colorado? And all their fears, they told me, like they were excited and they thought it was an amazing thing. But as they talked about it, they really spoke against taking risks and challenges. And then when I went to Milwaukee, I was, no lie, in handcuffs the first day there. And as I talked to my friends and family, they would say things like, I would have went home. I don't know how you made it. And I'm sitting here like, it's a risk. You take risks, you take challenges. How do you talk to yourself when it's time for you to expose yourself and be vulnerable? Take that risk. What kind of conversations, what feelings, what stories are you telling yourself when you are faced with risk? How does your family view risk? Have your aunts and uncles taking a lot of risk? Do you see your cousins taking risk? What they do are talking about it. Do they speak with this sense of hopelessness when you face challenges? Like, oh, you never done, we can't never beat that. Or do they move that from we to you can't do that? Because of their own fears. Are you out here making decisions and worrying about the what ifs? Well, what if this happens? Because worry is a real thing that our families pass down to us. And it puts us in a space where we start making fear-based decision making, where we can't do the things that are authentic to ourselves and good for our soul because we fear the possible outcome. How has these ideas affected you? What is something differently that you would like to do for your family, your legacy? Another way that this fear-based decision-making process shows up is in survival mode. And many of us don't even realize that survival mode has become so ingrained in us that we don't even recognize it. That many of us, when we slide from this space of poverty, we still live in this survival mode mindset. When we talked about our idea of abundance, one of the reasons why we keep sending mixed signals, we want abundance, we manifest abundance, we affirm abundance, but we worry about bills, is because of that fear-based decision making. You know what? My family never took family vacations, right? The reason why we never went on family vacations was because of fear-based decision making. What if we will need that money for something else? Are you doing that with your own life? What if I need that money for something else? Are you spending in a way that lets you recognize that you'll get that money back and probably tenfold? And that does mean live within your means. Don't go spending money that you don't have. But we don't even recognize how we're living in the survival mode because we call it saving. Right? We just moved from saving our money in the mattress to saving it in banks. And not to say that you shouldn't do that. But if you are saving so much that you no longer can enjoy the beauty of life, you are stuck in survival mode. If you are worried about a bill and that is conflicting your whole affirmation, your vision board with abundance, it's survival mode. Survival mode is not just finances as well. It is in relationships. If you are dating and you are out here worried about how the date might fail, how the relationship is going to fail, when I make this one mistake, what will happen? You are in survival mode. You can't even envision what thriving looks like because you're always preparing for the what ifs. Understand that, family. I think the last one we'll discuss tonight is pretty cool. Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah, we'll stop there. Is shame and guilt cycles? So when we think about shame and guilt, first context we want to think about it is religious shame and religious guilt. I remember there was a time, and it's funny because there's a new push for this idea of bring back shame. And there's a part of me that is like, yup, let's bring it back. We are functioning with no shame. But then there's the other side of me that remembers when shame was in vogue. I remember when I seen a video not too long ago. When young girls would get pregnant, they would make them stand in front of the church and apologize to the whole church. They would shame this person. You think they were families that there are some children who never made it to this world because the families were worried about the shame it would place on the family. How many kids got sent away because of shame? How many times have you had someone in your family tell you not to do that because of the shame it would bring. Religious shame has shaped a lot of lives to the point many of us are afraid to even ask questions, because questions in many of our culture can have us feel shame. Shame for not just believing. How were mistakes handled? Do you now make decisions with the shame in mind? Did you go to college because you thought that everybody would be ashamed of you if you didn't? That shameful way of thinking is something that is given to you, and it's the gift that keeps on giving. Another context that we want to talk about shame and guilt cycles is guilt-driven parenting. And a lot of us experience that. And it's funny. I remember a perfect example of guilt-driven parenting that I have is around whoopings and spankings, right? Children will get these things, and these parents will make these children believe that because they made mistakes as a child, they deserve physical harm. They don't say, I don't know what else to do. They make you feel guilty for making decisions for your life. What happened that time you wanted to go out for sports and your parents thought that you'd be hurt or injured? How did they address that? I know I can give you a live example. I'll never forget when I came to the realization that guilt-driven parenting was in my family. And it was one of the reasons why. Are you struggling with boundaries? If you feel guilty for creating boundaries, you were raised in a guilt-driven parenting environment. Anytime you stood up for yourself, you were made to feel guilty for having your own autonomy, for making a decision that might be good for you. You ain't do it right. You ain't do it like I do it. You ain't do it this. There's still parents that are still trying to guilt parent their children who are now parents, right? So I remember it's me, my people, my mom's and my stepfather. And we're sitting around, and my stepfather wants to go visit his family. My mom doesn't want him to go. Both of them are right. He's sick, so my mom don't want him to be out there because he might get sicker. He won't see his family because you never know. Last time he skipped it, one of his family members passed. He didn't get to see him. So he's sitting there having this discussion, right? And I see him make the decision that he was going, right? And once he made that decision, I can see my parent trying to convince him that that was the bad decision for himself, right? And once it got to that spot that they couldn't convince them that that was a bad decision for him, they did this, well, I just ain't gonna say nothing else. I'm just gonna take my hands off and I ain't gonna say nothing else. Have you ever experienced that in your family? Well, once you make a decision, everybody act like they hands off and they not gonna say nothing else. That is guilt-driven parenting. Just because a person made a decision that you don't like doesn't mean that you have to take this approach. How many times have you been told, I'm only doing this because I love you? That is guilt-driven parenting. If you are only doing this because you love me, I have questions about your love and the purpose, the true purpose of this. Because a lot of this that was done in the guise of love was for control. All right. So when you think about it, how have these things been passed down to you? Are you in a space where you are trying to help your children make good decisions? And when they make that decision, you make them feel guilty. How do you approach the conversation when their decision is different from yours? It is not what you envision for their life. You want your child to go be a lawyer or a doctor, and they won't be a rapper or a dancer. How do you make them feel about that? My family wanted me to be in the military or work in the hospital. If I ain't do one of those, I was made to feel guilty. Are you guilting your children into the path that you want for them? Or are you nurturing, and giving them the space to figure out what they need, and then supporting them with the decisions that they make for themselves? All right, family. It's 8:00. That's perfect. We finished that. So next week we can start on something else. Well, not. We still on generational curses. We got a lot. I still want to do lack of boundaries. That's enmeshment. So I know I need to put up discontent with enmeshment. Family, I appreciate you. I thank you for your time. I hope to see you here Thursday for Thursday Night Book Club, where we will continue reading Makes Me Wanna Holler. And if you can't make it here for Thursday night, I hope we get you back here Tuesday, where we'll continue our discussion on identifying our generational curses, so we can begin to start identifying the blessings that come with those things. Again, thank you for your time. Remember, we're on our throat chakra, so do your throat work. Speak your truth. Be authentic. And be courageous to communicate what matters to you. So, family, I thank you. And again, peace. Peace.